My name is Andrea Brooks, and I was 34 years old when my mother stood up at Sunday dinner, tapped her spoon against a water glass, and announced that my brother was moving into my house. Not asking, not suggesting, announcing. Caleb and the kids will be moving into Maple Street next month, she said, smiling at the table as though she had just revealed a surprise vacation. It makes the most sense. Andrea has all that space, and family should never struggle when there is room sitting empty. My father looked down at his plate. Aunt Carol nodded before my mother had even finished. Caleb gave me a small, relieved grin, the kind he had worn since childhood whenever somebody else had solved a problem for him. Nobody turned to me. Nobody said, "Andrea, is that okay?" Nobody asked whether I planned to keep living in the house they had just reassigned. So I did what I had been trained to do in my family. I stayed calm. I passed the green beans, and I let them keep talking. What none of them knew was that 2 days earlier, I had already sold the house. The closing papers were signed, the money was wired, the deed was no longer mine. The young couple who had bought it had agreed to let me remain there for a few weeks under a short rent-back arrangement while I prepared for my move north. My mother was assigning bedrooms in a house that legally belonged to strangers, and the copied key in her kitchen drawer was about to become a very expensive piece of brass. I could have told them that night. I could have watched my mother's face collapse before dessert. Instead, I listened, because for the first time in my life, I wanted to know how far they would go if I stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own certainty. Maple Street was a small 1952 bungalow with 3 bedrooms, oak floors, a narrow front porch, and a row of pink peonies along the walkway. I had bought it 7 years earlier with money I saved while everyone else seemed to assume stability had simply happened to me. I am a CPA. Numbers are how I make sense of the world. I knew exactly what that house cost, not only the purchase price. It cost me weekends at the office while friends traveled. It cost me evenings sanding floors after 10-hour workdays. It cost me the emergency savings I rebuilt twice, once after the furnace failed, and once after a pipe burst behind the downstairs wall. My family had not paid for any of it. In fact, my mother had visited the house 4 times in 7 years. 4. Yet from the way she spoke at dinner, you would have thought she had designed the floor plan herself. "Ellie should have the front bedroom," she continued. "She'll love the flowers outside the window. Sam can take the smaller room, and Caleb can use the master. The master, my bedroom." Aunt Carol smiled. "That sounds perfect." My mother looked pleased with herself. Exactly. Andrea doesn't need 3 bedrooms by herself. There it was. The sentence beneath every sentence in my family. Andrea doesn't need. Andrea can manage. Andrea will understand. Andrea has more. Andrea is strong. Those phrases sound like compliments until you realize they are just nicer ways of saying your needs are always negotiable. Caleb finally looked at me. This would really help, sis. He was 38, recently laid off from a warehouse job, recently divorced, and temporarily living in our parents' spare room. His children, Ellie and Sam, lived primarily with his ex-wife Tessa, but that detail had somehow disappeared from the emergency my mother was building around him. I loved my niece and nephew. That was never the question. The question was why everyone at that table believed loving them required surrendering something I owned without being asked. I took a sip of water. "July?" Aunt Carol asked. "July 11th, my mother said immediately. I already checked with the truck rental. I nearly smiled. She had rented a truck. Of course she had. My mother, Linda Brooks, did not make plans. She created weather systems and expected everyone else to dress accordingly. She was 63, organized, church-going, generous in ways that looked beautiful from across a room, and almost impossible to oppose without appearing ungrateful. If she brought you soup, you owed her agreement. If she prayed for you, you owed her access. If she called something family, the conversation was over. My father, Roy, had survived nearly 40 years of marriage by becoming quiet at exactly the right moments. He was not cruel. That almost made it harder. Cruel people are easy to identify. My father simply disappeared whenever a boundary needed defending. That night, he cut his pot roast into pieces so small, I wondered whether he planned to stay there until retirement. My mother turned to Caleb. "I'll make another copy of Andrea's spare key this week. That way you can start measuring." That got my attention. 5 years earlier, I had given her a spare key for emergencies, a burst pipe, a medical emergency, a house alarm. Apparently, in her dictionary, unemployment had become a locksmith issue. I still said nothing. Not because I was scared of them. At least, not exactly. Silence had become a reflex in my family long before I understood it was a choice. When I was 19, I started doing my parents' taxes for free. When I was 26, I loaned them $4,000 for roof repairs and never saw it again. When Caleb's marriage broke apart, I sorted insurance forms, helped him find an attorney, organized his debt, and spent 3 Saturdays building a budget he ignored within a month. Nobody forced me at gunpoint. That is important. I volunteered often enough that eventually they stopped seeing the difference between help and obligation. That was my part in it. But the house was different. The house had already taught me something my family had not. Ownership requires paperwork. Love does not. And confusing the two can ruin both. 2 days before that dinner, I had sat in a title office beside my friend Dana, who had worked in real estate for a decade, and signed my name until my hand cramped. The buyers were Claire and David Henderson. Claire worked in pediatric imaging. David taught middle school science. They were tired of losing bidding wars and thrilled to buy a house without competing against 20 offers. I was thrilled not to put a sign in the yard. They offered $265,000. I accepted. The closing was clean. The only unusual part was timing. My firm had promoted me to lead a new office near Grand Lake, almost an hour north. I had already put a deposit on a small blue cottage there, but it would not be ready until early July. So the Hendersons agreed to a 30-day rent back. Legally, they owned Maple Street. Temporarily, I still lived there. Emotionally, I had already left. I had planned to tell my family the following Sunday. I even rehearsed the speech. I got a promotion. I sold the house. I'm moving. 3 sentences. Simple, adult, final. But my mother got to the microphone first. By dessert, she had moved Caleb into my master bedroom, assigned the children their rooms, scheduled the truck, and started discussing school districts. That was when I understood something important. If I told her the truth at that table, she would not hear, "The house is sold." She would hear, "There are 5 weeks to stop Andrea." There would be phone calls, church friends, crying, accusations, children placed in the middle, maybe even pressure on the buyers if she somehow found out who they were. My closing was complete, but my exit was not. So I made a decision. I would tell them privately, once, calmly, clearly. And if they refused to hear me, I would stop translating reality into a language they preferred. That was the plan. My mother defeated it in 3 days. Wednesday evening, she called while I was washing a coffee mug. "July 11th is confirmed," she said without saying hello. "Carol gets a discount on the box truck through someone at church. We'll start early because of the heat." "Mom, we need to talk about the house." "I know, honey. Don't worry about cleaning before they move in. Nobody expects perfection." I closed my eyes. "That isn't what I mean. Caleb thinks the sectional may not fit through your hallway, so you might need to move your reading chair downstairs." My reading chair, in my house, being relocated by committee. "Mom," and Pastor Jim's wife said this is one of the most generous things she has ever heard. That sentence landed differently. "You told people at church." Well, of course, people are happy for Caleb. He has had such a hard year. I leaned against the counter. There was the mechanism. My mother had made the decision public before making it mine. Now refusal would not look like information. It would look like humiliation. That was one of her oldest tricks, though I doubt she thought of it as a trick. Announce the outcome widely enough, and anyone who objects becomes the person creating the problem. "Come by tomorrow," I said. "Just you, Dad, and me. We need to talk." "Thursday is difficult. We have the rummage sale set up." "Friday, then. We'll see." "No, Mom, we need a time." There was a pause, a small one. But in my family, a pause from my mother meant I had stepped somewhere she did not expect to find resistance. "Sunday dinner," she said finally. "I don't want to discuss this in front of everyone." Another pause. Then her voice softened. "Sweetheart, there's nothing to discuss. It's settled." Click. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone after the call ended. For years, that phrase had worked on me. It's settled. As if certainty were the same as authority. as if saying something calmly could turn theft into generosity. I looked around the kitchen. Half the shelves were already empty. Boxes waited behind the guest room door. The Hendersons owned the walls. My mother owned a story. And for the first time, I realized those two things were about to collide. I took the calendar off the refrigerator, counted the days until I moved north, and drew a line through the square marked Sunday dinner. I was done waiting for permission to explain my own life. The next morning, Caleb texted me, "Going to swing by Saturday and measure the rooms. What time works?" I stared at the message. Then another appeared. "Mom gave me a key." And beneath that, a smiling emoji. That was the moment my patience changed shape. Not anger, not yet, something cleaner. I opened my laptop. I created a folder, and I named it July 11. I saved screenshots of every message. I wrote down the dates of every call. I scanned the rent-back agreement and the closing statement. Then I emailed Dana one sentence. "My family thinks they are moving into the Hendersons' house." She called immediately. "Do they actually have keys? Copies of the old one? And do they know you sold?" "Not yet." There was silence, followed by the voice professionals use when they realize somebody else's family is becoming paperwork. "Andrea, tell the buyers." "I will. Today." I looked at Caleb's smiling emoji again. Today. Before noon, I had arranged coffee with Claire and David for that evening. I still intended to warn my family. I wanted the ending to be gentle, but I had finally accepted one fact my mother had spent years teaching me, without meaning to. When people keep treating your boundaries like suggestions, words are not enough. Sooner or later, reality has to answer for you. Claire and David were already seated when I reached the coffee shop that evening, a folder between them and two untouched cups cooling on the table. I sat down, took one breath, and told them everything. Not the polished version, the real version. "My mother has decided my brother is moving into your house on July 11th, I said. "She has rented a truck. She copied my emergency key without asking. My brother believes the front bedroom belongs to his daughter, the small room belongs to his son, and my old bedroom belongs to him." Claire stared at me for 3 seconds. David blinked twice. Then Claire asked, "Do the copied keys still work?" "Yes." "Do they know we own the house?" "Not yet." David leaned back. I expected irritation, maybe suspicion, maybe the kind of look that says, "Why did we buy a house from this woman?" Instead, he asked, "Are they dangerous?" "No." I thought about it. Just extremely confident. That made Claire laugh once, without humor. Confidence can be expensive. I liked her immediately. I slid copies of the closing statement and rent-back agreement across the table. "I'm telling them. I've tried already, but my mother turns every conversation into an announcement before I can finish a sentence. I wanted you to know because I don't want anyone showing up here after possession and claiming they were misled." David read the dates carefully. "We take possession July 3rd. "Yes. And the truck is July 11th. "Yes." He looked at Claire. "We rekey on the 3rd. She nodded. Not dramatically, not triumphantly, just practically. That was the first thing about them that made me feel safe. They did not need to win. They only needed the facts to remain facts. "I'm sorry," I said. "You bought a bungalow. You did not agree to inherit my family." Claire stirred her coffee and looked at me steadily. "We bought our home. We'll be polite, and we'll be clear. That's enough." Polite and clear. I repeated those words silently on the drive home. They sounded almost radical. In my family, politeness had always meant surrender, and clarity had always been treated as cruelty. Maybe those words did not have to cancel each other out. Saturday morning, Caleb came anyway. I had told him not to. At 10:17, his truck rolled up beside the curb while I was carrying a box of kitchenware toward my car. He stepped out holding a tape measure. "Perfect timing," he said. "For what?" "The rooms. I told you this wasn't a good time." He shrugged. "It'll take 5 minutes." Then Ellie climbed out of the passenger side. That stopped me. She was 8, all elbows and serious eyes, holding a little notebook covered in glitter stickers. "Dad said I can pick where my desk goes." I looked at Caleb. He had brought his daughter because he knew I would not make a scene in front of her. Maybe he did not consciously know it. That almost made it worse. "Hey, Bug," I said to Ellie, "why don't you sit on the porch for a minute? I have lemonade. She brightened. Caleb followed me toward the steps. What's with the boxes? Work stuff. Looks like more than work. I'm organizing. He gave me the same easy grin from dinner. See? Perfect. We'll have less to move around. Something inside me went very still. Caleb. He stopped. This house is not yours. His smile faded a fraction. Mom said you were getting weird about this. I'm not getting weird. I'm telling you something directly. He lowered his voice. Look, I know it's an adjustment, but you have to admit this makes sense. For whom? For everybody. No, for you. He glanced toward Ellie. Can we not do this in front of her? You brought her. That landed. For once, he had nothing ready. I continued. You cannot enter this house without me. You cannot measure rooms. You cannot move furniture. You cannot use that copied key. Do you understand? His face changed then. Not angry, offended. Like I had refused to honor a coupon. Mom gave me permission. I almost laughed. She does not own the house. She's trying to help. She can help you with something she owns. He stared at me. Then he slipped the tape measure into his pocket. Fine. But his tone said temporary. Ellie came back, holding a plastic cup. Can I still have the flower room? There are questions adults create and children are forced to ask. I hated all of us for that one. I crouched so we were eye level. Your grandma got ahead of herself. She frowned. Does that mean no? It means grown-ups need to figure out some things before anybody promises you a room. She looked disappointed, but she nodded. Children often accept clear answers faster than adults who have built their lives around avoiding them. Caleb did not. He put Ellie in the truck and shut the door harder than necessary. You're really going to make this difficult? I looked at him across the hood. No, I'm asking you to notice that it was never yours to make easy. He drove away. 10 minutes later, my mother called. I let it ring. Then Aunt Carol called. I let that ring too. Then my father. That one almost got me, almost. I silenced the phone and carried another box to the car. That afternoon, I drove north to the cottage and unpacked 3 shelves of books. Every object I placed there felt like a vote. My coffee mugs, my grandmother's quilt, a framed photo of Ellie and Sam at the zoo, the blue ceramic bowl my mother hated because she said it did not match anything. I put it in the center of the kitchen table, let it not match. The next morning was Sunday. For the first time in years, I did not go to family dinner. At 4:30, my mother texted, dinner is at 5, at 5:12, everyone is waiting. At 5:40, this is childish. At 6:19, your brother apologized for upsetting you. Come over and let's move forward. Caleb had not apologized. At 7:03, family does not punish family with silence. I read that one twice. Then I turned the phone face down and opened a bottle of sparkling water. The cottage windows looked west. The lake held the sunset like something it had no intention of giving back. I sat there until dark, without answering anyone. The silence felt different now. Not like fear, like ownership. Monday morning, Tessa called me before work. I need to ask you something before Linda enrolls my children in another imaginary future. I closed my office door. What happened? She dropped off school transfer forms. Of course she did. For Maple Street? Your address is already written in. I leaned back slowly. Tessa continued. She says Caleb will have them most of the week once he moves because the district is better. Did you agree to that? No. Did Caleb? He says he assumed we would discuss it later. There it was again. The family method. Announce first, discuss later. Preferably after everyone else has emotionally adjusted to the announcement. Tessa, I said, the house is sold. Silence. Then a sharp exhale. You sold it? Closed already. When? June 5th. Another pause. Then she laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes relief escapes wearing the wrong coat. Good. That is not the reaction I expected. Andrea, I was married into your family for 11 years. 6 married, 5 dating before that. I know what Linda does when she decides something is best for everybody. I said nothing. Tessa's voice softened. You need to understand something. The kids are not homeless. They have bedrooms here. Caleb is staying with your parents because he lost his job, not because Ellie and Sam have nowhere to sleep. I know. No, I mean really understand it. Linda is selling this as an emergency, so you feel monstrous saying no. It is not an emergency. I stared at the closing statement on my desk. What is it then? Convenience, control, maybe both. That answer stayed with me. Before we hung up, Tessa promised not to sign any school paperwork. Then she added, "And if your mother tries to use the kids against you, call me before you believe her version." That sentence felt heavier than it should have. I wrote it down. Tuesday evening, I came home to find my back door unlocked. I knew before stepping inside that somebody had been there. A kitchen chair was crooked. The rug near the hallway had shifted. There was a yellow tape measure on the windowsill. Not mine. Then my phone buzzed. Caleb, measured real quick. Back door sticks. You should fix that before move day, lol. For a moment, I simply stood in the kitchen. My body registered the violation before my mind gave it language. He had entered after I told him not to. He had used the copied key. He had walked through rooms that were still legally occupied by me and already owned by someone else. He had measured walls for furniture he would never bring inside, and he had sent me a laughing face. That was the exact moment I stopped trying to create a soft landing. I called Dana first, then Claire. Then I photographed everything. The door, the chair, the tape measure, the message. I emailed the photos to myself with the date in the subject line. After that, I packed until 1 in the morning, not frantically, methodically, files first, documents, jewelry, grandmother's quilt, anything sentimental, anything I could not replace. By Wednesday night, Maple Street looked less like a home and more like a stage after the audience leaves. My mother noticed nothing. That was the strange part. She called every day and never once asked how I was. She asked whether the garage was cleared, whether Caleb's sectional would fit, whether I could leave the patio table, whether the children could keep the curtains. She never asked why my voice had become so calm. People rarely notice your withdrawal when they only valued your usefulness. Friday was my final night in the bungalow. I walked room to room barefoot. The oak floor was cool beneath my feet. In the front bedroom, moonlight fell across the empty wall where Ellie's imaginary desk was supposed to go. In the smaller room, I could still see the faint rectangle where a bookshelf had protected the paint from 7 years of sunlight. Then I stood in my bedroom. My mother had assigned this room to Caleb before she ever asked whether I planned to leave it. I opened the closet. Empty. For years, everyone had called my life spacious because they never bothered to see what filled it. Work, quiet, books, mornings, plans, a future. Apparently none of those counted as occupancy. I slept on an air mattress that night. At 6 the next morning, I carried the final box outside. Then I dug up one peony from the far end of the flower bed. My grandmother had grown the same kind. I wrapped the roots in damp newspaper and placed them carefully in a pot. One piece of Maple Street was coming with me. The rest belonged to the Hendersons. Before leaving, I put every legitimate key on the kitchen counter. Then I took one last look around. 7 years. 7 years of fixing what broke, paying what came due, coming home to myself. My family had called those rooms empty. I finally understood why that hurt so much. They had not been describing the house. They had been describing me. I closed the door. The lock clicked. And this time, I did not look back. At the curb, I put the peony beside me, started the car, and drove north toward a life nobody else had assigned for me again. The morning of July 11th arrived bright, hot, and offensively ordinary. I had slept badly. I had made peace with the sale. What kept my stomach tight was knowing my family still believed their certainty could somehow overrule signatures, dates, locks, and ownership itself. For weeks, my mother had planned that morning like a wedding. The truck, the boxes, the church friends, pizza afterward. She had announced it so many times that the event had taken on the weight of something official. Reality was about to disagree. At 7:30, Tessa texted me. Linda confirmed they are loading now. At 7:42, another message. She has the kids with her. I called immediately. Tessa, why are Ellie and Sam there? She picked them up early from Caleb. He told them it was moving day. I closed my eyes. Of course. If anything gets ugly, take them. I already planned to. At 8:12, Dana texted. Hendersons are home. Locks changed last week. They know today may be interesting. At 8:26, my mother sent a message to the family group chat. Big day. So proud of Caleb. New beginnings for everyone. There were heart emojis beneath it. Aunt Carol replied with a truck emoji. Pastor Jim's wife wrote, God provides. I almost admired the confidence. At 8:41, my phone rang. Ellie. I answered before the second ring. Aunt Andrea. Her voice was small. What is it, sweetheart? There's a lady in your house. I was already moving toward my keys. What lady? She says it's her house. Behind Ellie, I heard adult voices, one sharp, one controlled. Then Sam yelled something about the truck ramp. Put your dad on. A pause. Then Caleb. Andrea, what the hell is going on? His voice was not angry yet, confused first. What did the woman tell you? She says she owns the house. She does. Silence. Long enough that I heard birds through my open cottage door. What? Her name is Claire Henderson. She and her husband bought the house in June. Another silence. Then his voice changed. You sold it? Yes. You sold the house? Yes. And you didn't tell anybody? I tried. That is not an answer. It is the only one you're getting on the phone. In the background, my mother shouted my name. Caleb lowered his voice. Mom is losing it. I'll be there in 50 minutes. You need to fix this. There it was. Even now. Fix this. Not explain it. Not help us understand. Fix the consequence. Caleb, listen carefully. Do not force a door. Do not threaten Claire or David. Do not unload anything else. Get the kids away from the argument. This is insane. No, it's a property sale. I hung up. The drive south felt longer than every trip I had made to Maple Street before. I kept both hands on the wheel. My heart hammered. Fear was there, but underneath it was something sturdier. Completion. By the time I turned onto Maple Street, the scene looked exactly like what happens when certainty meets a locked door. Aunt Carol's rented box truck sat crooked across the driveway. Its back gate was open. Half a sectional sofa rested on the metal ramp. Boxes covered part of the lawn. Someone had set a lamp beside the peonies. My mother stood on the front walk in a pale blue blouse, one hand raised toward Claire Henderson, as though cross-examining her. Caleb was on the porch, trying his brass key again and again in a deadbolt it had never been cut to fit. The red ribbon was still tied around the ring. Claire stood inside the open storm door, wearing scrubs and an expression of remarkable restraint. David stood beside her. 3 neighbors watched from their porches. Aunt Carol was beside the truck, with both palms pressed to her cheeks. My father was near the curb, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who had been hoping invisibility might become an actual skill. Then my car door closed. Every face turned toward me. My mother started walking before I reached the sidewalk. Andra. One word. But I had heard entire speeches in that tone. What did you do? I stopped several feet away. I sold my house. You sold our house. No. The word came out softer than hers. That made it stronger. My house. Her face tightened. You knew Caleb was moving in. No, Mom. You decided Caleb was moving in. Do not play word games with me. I'm not. Words matter. She looked toward the neighbors. That was when I knew we were no longer talking privately. She needed the audience. You let your brother pack his whole life. I told him not to enter the house. You let those children believe they had rooms. You told them they had rooms. Her mouth opened, closed. For the first time, the pronouns had nowhere to hide. Behind us, Caleb came down the steps. You could have said something. I did. When? Saturday. I told you this house was not yours. You didn't say it was sold. You didn't ask why. That's ridiculous. Is it? He looked away. My mother stepped closer. You humiliated us. No, you made a public promise with private property. Her cheeks went red. Family fills empty rooms. I had heard that sentence so many times it no longer sounded warm. It sounded administrative. I looked past her at Maple Street, at Claire's curtains now hanging in the front window, at David's shoes by the entry, at a cardboard box marked kitchen sitting just inside the door. Then I looked back at my mother. The rooms weren't empty. She scoffed. You lived alone. Yes, that is exactly what I mean. No, that is exactly the problem. The street went quiet. Even Aunt Carol stopped moving. I lived there, Mom. I worked there. I paid for it. I repaired it. I built a life there. A life with one person in it is still a life. Her eyes sharpened. This is not the time for speeches. You made it the time when you brought a truck. David stepped forward then. His voice stayed calm. We need the driveway cleared. My mother turned on him. You stay out of this, Claire answered before he could. This is our property, Mrs. Brooks. That makes it our business. My mother stared at her. There are people who become louder when facts stop obeying them. My mother became sweeter. Honey, she said to Claire, I'm sure there has been confusion. My daughter would never sell this house out from under her family. Claire looked at me. I nodded. Then she said, we closed on June 5th. My mother's face changed. June 5th. 2 days before dinner. That date did what none of my explanations could have done. It proved her announcement had never controlled anything. She looked at me slowly. You had already sold it. Yes. At dinner. Yes. And you sat there. Yes. The accusation in that last silence was almost artistic. She wanted my calm to be the crime. My father finally moved. Linda. She ignored him. You let me make a fool of myself. No, Mom. My voice shook once, and I hated that it did, but I continued. I let you finish. Her eyes widened. Behind her, Aunt Carol whispered, Oh Lord. Caleb dropped his hand. The useless keys hung beside his leg. My mother stared at me as if I had slapped her. Then she said the sentence that ended any doubt I still carried. You should have stopped me. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because there it was, the whole family system in 5 words. You should have stopped me. You should have saved me from what I chose. You should have absorbed the embarrassment before it reached me. You should have caught the plate I threw. You should have softened the wall I drove into. I looked at her. No, just that. No. Tessa pulled up then. Perfect timing. She parked behind my car, walked straight to Ellie and Sam, and crouched. Who wants ice cream? Sam raised both hands. Ellie looked toward me. Are you coming? Later, Bug. She studied my face. Are you okay? 8 years old, the only person who had asked. Yes. And because she deserved the truth, I added, I will be. Tessa took their hands and led them toward her car. My mother called after her. We are in the middle of something. Tessa did not turn around. The children aren't. That sentence sliced through the street cleaner than shouting ever could. I watched the car pull away. Then I faced the adults. Caleb rubbed both hands over his face. So what am I supposed to do now? The question was familiar. Usually, I would have started solving. Apartment listings. Deposits. Spreadsheets. Calls. I felt the reflex rise. Then pass. I don't know. He stared at me. You don't know? No, you're a CPA, you always have a plan. For me. The words landed between us. For my life, I have a plan. His mouth tightened. I have nowhere to go. You live with Mom and Dad. That's temporary. So was my house supposed to be permanent? He did not answer. My mother did. You have money now. Of course. There it was. The house had failed as the resource, so the sale proceeds became the resource. You made a fortune on this place, she continued. You can help him get settled. I looked at her for a long moment. The moving truck had not even left the driveway, and the campaign had already changed targets. That was when something inside me became absolutely certain. Selling the house had not solved my real problem. It had only revealed it. There would always be another room, another check, another emergency, another reason why what I built belonged to everyone the moment they needed it. Unless I changed the rule. David spoke again. We need the truck moved now. Aunt Carol snapped out of her shock and climbed into the cab. The retreat began. Boxes were lifted back onto the truck. The sectional went up the ramp inch by inch. David helped without sarcasm. Claire moved the lamp off the peonies. Caleb stood motionless until my father finally touched his shoulder and said, Come on, son. My mother did not carry a single box. She stood by the curb watching me, not crying, not yelling, worse, calculating. When the truck was finally loaded, Caleb removed the brass keys from his pocket. For a second I thought he might hand them to me. Instead, he placed them on the porch rail. The red ribbon moved in the breeze. Then he walked away. My father passed me last. He paused. His eyes went toward the house, then toward my mother. Then back to me. Your grandmother had a piano, he said quietly. I frowned. What? But he had already turned. The truck pulled away. My parents followed. Aunt Carol's car disappeared behind them. Within 3 minutes, Maple Street was quiet again. Claire picked up the ribboned keys from the porch rail. She held them toward me. Do you want these? I looked at them. No. Then I changed my mind. Actually, yes. I took the ring. The keys opened nothing now, but suddenly I understood that was exactly why I wanted them. Some objects are useful after they stop working. They become evidence. Not for court, for memory. I put them in my pocket. That night, at 9:14, my mother sent one message. Family meeting, Tuesday, 6 o'clock. Then another arrived. You owe your brother that much. I sat on my new porch with the useless keys beside my coffee. The lake was black beyond the railing. I read her message twice. Then I opened my laptop. If she wanted a meeting about what I owed, fine. For once, I would bring the ledger. Sunday passed without a call from my father. Monday did not. At 11:23 that morning, my phone buzzed while I was reviewing quarterly reports. Dad, Andrea? His voice was low. Yeah, you coming tomorrow? I am. Another pause. You should. That sounds ominous. He cleared his throat. Your mother has numbers. Of course she did. What numbers? She'll tell you. Dad. Silence again. Then, unexpectedly, he said, I should have said something Saturday. I leaned back in my chair. When? All of it. The words were so small I nearly missed them. You could have. I know. I had spent years believing silence kept peace, but Dad's story showed me what silence teaches people to repeat. Before hanging up, he added, Come early. Why? I need to show you something. So Tuesday, instead of arriving at 6, I pulled into my parents' driveway at 5:20. The garage door was open. Dad stood beside the lawnmower with a rag in one hand and no visible reason to be touching the engine. Brooks' men did not flee conflict. They maintained equipment through it. I stepped inside. You wanted me early. He nodded. Then he shut the garage door. For several seconds he stared at a shelf of paint cans. Finally he said, Your grandmother had a piano. You said that already. I know. What does it mean? He rubbed both hands over the rag. Your mother played. I laughed softly from surprise. Mom! Beautifully. Our house had never contained a piano, not even an old keyboard. She started lessons when she was 6, played through high school, church weddings, recitals, everything. What happened? Dad sat on the mower seat. Your grandmother died in 89. Mom would have been 26. There was a house on Fairlawn, he continued. Small place, paid off, and there was the piano. Your mother thought she and her brother would split things. Uncle Gene? He nodded. But your grandfather said the house should stay with the son because of the family name. I felt something cold move beneath my ribs. And the piano? Stayed with the house. Why? Dad gave me a sad look, because that's what he decided. I knew the answer before asking. Did Mom fight him? No, why not? Because he told her family makes sacrifices, told her Jean had a baby and needed the space, said Linda had me, a job, and a good marriage, said she was doing better already. The sentences felt horribly familiar. What did you do? His eyes dropped. Nothing. There it was. Not history. A blueprint. She signed whatever he put in front of her, Dad said. Never played again. I stared at him. And nobody thought that was wrong? I did. Did you say it? His mouth tightened. No. The anger came fast. So you watched her lose something she loved, and then you watched her do the same thing to me? His face folded. I didn't see it that way. You didn't want to. He flinched. That was crueler than I intended. Also true. Dad looked toward the kitchen door. She built a religion around surviving that day. What religion? If you give something up for family, then it proves you love them. If you refuse, then you must love yourself more. I thought about the house, the roof money, the free taxes, every swallowed sentence. Suddenly, my mother's entire moral vocabulary had a source. Not an excuse, a source. Dad continued. She never forgave her father. Then why become him? His eyes filled. Maybe because admitting she could have said no would mean she lost all that for nothing. That sentence followed me into the kitchen. My mother sat at the head of the table. Caleb was to her right. Aunt Carol was there too, which meant family meeting had already become hearing. On the table were 2 sheets of paper. One was a legal pad, the other was a printout. My chair waited opposite my mother. "Sit," she said. "No hello." I sat. Dad came in behind me and took the chair near the window. Mom slid the legal pad forward. At the bottom, under several lines of expenses, was a number. $60,000. I looked up. "What is this?" "A solution." "To what?" "To the mess you created." Caleb shifted in his chair. My mother tapped the page. "First month, deposit. Enough rent for a year. Truck payment, credit cards, furniture, school expenses. 60,000 gives your brother a clean start." I looked at Caleb. "Did you make this list?" "No. Did you ask for $60,000? He hesitated. "Not exactly." My mother answered for him. "He should not have to ask." Of course, that sentence again. Need without asking, giving without consent, obligation without conversation. She continued. "You cleared well over 100,000 on that house." "How do you know?" "Dana's cousin knows the sale price." And you have more than enough." "For what?" "To help." I looked at the legal pad, then at my mother. "You already tried to give Caleb my house. Now you want to give him the money from my house." Her mouth tightened. "Do not twist this." "I'm not twisting anything. Those children need stability. They have stability." She went still. I continued. "They live with Tessa. They have bedrooms. They have a school. They are not homeless." Caleb looked down. My mother's eyes sharpened. "Who told you that?" "Tessa. That woman has poisoned everything since the divorce." "No," she answered a question. Aunt Carol sighed. "Andrea, why are you being so hard?" I turned toward her. "Hard compared to what?" She blinked. "Compared to family." I almost smiled. There it was, a noun used as a weapon. My mother folded her hands. "Let's make this simple. You write the check, we put Saturday behind us. You come back Sunday. Thanksgiving is normal. Christmas is normal. The children do not have to hear adults fighting." The threat was wrapped so carefully I nearly admired it. "You're saying if I don't pay Caleb $60,000, I'm out of the family?" "No one said that." "You just did." "I said choices have consequences." "So do yours." Her face hardened. Then she looked toward the refrigerator. Ellie and Sam's school pictures hung beneath a magnet. My mother's voice softened. "Grandma decides what happens in Grandma's house." There it was. Access. The real currency. I looked at Caleb. "Are you going to stop me from seeing your kids?" His ears reddened. "I don't want to be in the middle." "You are the middle." He rubbed his face. "Why can't you just help?" "I have helped." "Not like this." "No, not like this." My mother pushed the legal pad closer. "You can afford it." That was the most dangerous sentence anyone had ever used on me. Not because it was false, because it was true. I could afford it. I could write the check and still buy the cottage. I could preserve Sunday dinner. I could keep Christmas. I could keep access to the children. The math worked. The math had always worked. That was the trap. Every previous sacrifice had been affordable too. 4,000 for the roof. Countless weekends for paperwork. Hours of free labor. Small enough payments that none looked like the one that would bankrupt me. But together they had purchased a life where everyone believed my resources were public property. I opened my bag. My mother relaxed. She thought I was reaching for my checkbook. Instead, I pulled out a folder. I placed it on the table. 3 pages. My mother frowned. "What is that?" 2 education accounts. Caleb looked up. 1 for Ellie. 1 for Sam. I opened them yesterday. I slid the pages toward him. $200 a month into each until they turn 18. He stared at the documents. "That's almost $50,000. More, depending on growth." My mother's face changed. I kept going. "The accounts stay in my name. The money goes toward their education. Nobody borrows against it. Nobody redirects it. Nobody uses it for rent, trucks, debt, or emergencies invented at this table." Aunt Carol inhaled sharply. My mother did not move. I looked at Caleb. I love your children. I will help them because I choose to, not because someone announces what I owe. He stared at the pages. And me? The question was quiet. It hurt more than I expected. You are 38. His jaw tightened. I know how old I am, then I'm going to treat you like it. Mom pushed her chair back. That is cruel. No. I turned toward her. Cruel would be pretending he cannot survive without me, because that keeps him dependent on all of us. Caleb looked stung. Good. Sometimes dignity begins as an insult when someone has spent years being rescued. My mother stood. I gave everything to this family. Her voice cracked. Not church voice, not hostess voice, something rawer. I gave up everything, and I never once kept score. The garage conversation flashed through me. A piano, a house, a 26-year-old woman signing because her father called sacrifice love. I looked at her hands. They were shaking. For 1 second, I did not see the woman who copied my key. I saw the daughter who had signed away her own. Mom, my voice softened. You should have been allowed to say no. No. She froze. Nobody moved. Dad closed his eyes. I continued. What Grandpa did to you was wrong. Her face drained. Your father talks too much. No, he talked 37 years too late. She looked at him with such fury that he physically leaned back. Then she turned to me. You know nothing about it. I know enough. You know nothing about sacrifice. I know exactly what you taught me. Her eyes filled. I survived, yes. And you think you're better because you refuse to? No, I swallowed. I think surviving something does not make it sacred. That broke whatever remained. Her hand swept across the table. The education account papers flew to the floor. Aunt Carol gasped. Caleb stood halfway. Dad whispered, Linda. My mother pointed toward the door. If that paperwork matters more than your family, take it and go. I bent down, picked up each page, smoothed the corners, then I placed them back on the table. The accounts stay open. I said go. The money transfers on the 1st of every month, whether you approve or not. You are not my daughter if you walk out that door. Silence. There are sentences you spend your whole life afraid someone might say. Then they say them, and sometimes the fear ends before the sentence does. I looked at her, not angry, not triumphant, just finished. I was never an empty room, Mom. Her face trembled. None of us were. I glanced at Caleb, then Dad, then back to her. You just learn to measure love by what people surrender. I picked up my bag. At the door, I stopped. I'm done paying admission to this table. Then I walked outside. Behind me, nobody followed. Not immediately. I reached my car, put my hand on the door. Then the screen door opened. Dad came down the steps. His eyes were wet. I should have spoken in '89, he said. I waited, and Saturday. Another step. And tonight. I nodded. Yes. His face crumpled. I'm sorry. For once, I did not rescue him from the discomfort of saying it. I let the apology stand. Then my phone buzzed. Tessa. I opened the message. Kids want the lake Saturday. You free? I laughed through tears. Dad looked confused. I turned the screen toward him. He read it. Then he smiled. Small. Broken. Real. Go, he said. So I did. And for the first time in my life, leaving my mother's table did not feel like losing my family. It felt like finding the part of it that had been waiting outside the door. Saturday morning, I woke before the alarm. For a few seconds, I did not know why my chest felt light. Then I remembered. I was not expected at Sunday dinner tomorrow. There would be no chair waiting near the kitchen, no gravy boat passed toward me, no small crisis placed beside my plate as though it belonged there. The absence should have hurt more. Instead, it felt like waking after a storm and realizing the roof had held. At 9, Tessa's car came up the gravel drive. Sam was out before she had fully stopped. He ran toward the porch wearing the same red cape from ice cream day. Ellie followed more carefully, sketchbook under one arm. Tessa stepped out last. She looked at the cottage, then at me. This suits you. I smiled. I think so. The kids went straight toward the lake. Sam shouted that he had found a dragonfly. Ellie shouted that dragonflies were not evidence of dragons. Within 30 seconds, they were arguing happily enough to make the whole property feel occupied. Tessa stayed beside the car. How bad was Tuesday? Bad enough. Did Linda threaten the kids? She implied access depended on the check. Tessa's jaw tightened. She does not get to decide that. I know. No, Andrea. I mean legally, practically, morally, any version you want. She does not decide when you see my children. My throat tightened. Thank you. She shrugged. They love you. You are safe. You show up. That is the entire calculation. Simple. No ceremony. No moral invoice. Just love measured by behavior. I wished families worked like that by default. Tessa opened her purse and handed me a folded sheet. What is this? Caleb's new schedule. I unfolded it. Forklift certification orientation Monday. Warehouse interview Wednesday. Apartment viewing Friday. I looked up. He did this? Mostly. That single word mattered. Mostly? I sent him one job link. He applied to 6 others himself. I stared at the paper. Tessa smiled faintly. Turns out a grown man can move when everybody stops carrying him. I laughed, then felt guilty for laughing. She noticed. Don't what? Make his progress proof that you should have rescued him differently. That was irritatingly accurate. I hate when nurses diagnose people outside work. I'm off the clock. She left after lunch. The children stayed. That night, Ellie slept in the spare room, and Sam fell asleep sideways on the couch after insisting he was not tired. I carried him down the hall. For years, my mother had called spare bedrooms empty. But standing there with a sleeping 5-year-old against my shoulder, I understood the difference between availability and entitlement. The room was available because I chose to make it available. That choice made all the difference. Sunday afternoon, my phone stayed quiet until 4:58. 1 minute before dinner. A message from Dad. Thinking of you. Nothing else. I typed, thinking of you too, then deleted it. Then typed it again. Sent. That became our pattern. Every Thursday, Dad called from the garage. I always knew because I could hear the mower running behind him even when it was raining. At first, we discussed nothing important. Weather, gas prices, a loose gutter at the cottage, whether peonies liked morning sun. Then, gradually, he started saying things that had been stored inside him for decades. I should have protected your mother from her father. Another Thursday. I thought staying neutral meant I wasn't hurting anybody. And once, after a long silence, it mostly meant the loudest person won. I never told him he was forgiven. Not because I wanted to punish him, because forgiveness is not a receipt you hand someone for saying the right words. I let him keep showing up. That seemed more honest. My mother did not call. She did not text. She removed me from the family group chat sometime in August. I knew because Aunt Carol accidentally forwarded me a photo that had obviously come from it. Everyone was eating Sunday dinner. My chair had been pushed against the wall. I stared at the picture longer than I want to admit. Loss does not disappear just because leaving was right. Some evenings I missed my mother's pot roast. I missed Aunt Carol complaining about church parking. I missed Dad pretending not to hear when Sam crawled under the table. I even missed being useful. That was the embarrassing part. Being needed can feel dangerously similar to being loved when you have practiced confusing them for long enough. The first Sunday after I saw that photograph, I almost drove south. I put on shoes, picked up my keys. Then I stopped. Not because I remembered the $60,000, because I remembered the sentence. Everything goes back to how it was. That was the offer. Not reconciliation, restoration. My mother did not want a healthier relationship. She wanted the old arrangement returned to service. I took my shoes off, made pasta, watched the lake darken. Monday morning, the education transfers went out. 200 for Ellie, 200 for Sam. The accounts did not care whether my mother approved. That steadiness comforted me. By September, my new office had found its rhythm. My name was printed beside the glass door. Andrea Brooks, Regional Director. The first week, I kept expecting someone to tell me the sign was temporary. Nobody did. I hired 2 junior accountants and a receptionist named Maribel who could organize 6 calendars while eating yogurt and remembering everyone's birthdays. The office was mine to lead, not mine to rescue. That distinction followed me everywhere. When one employee missed a deadline, I did not stay until midnight fixing it myself. I sat with him the next morning and made him correct it. When Maribel asked whether I could cover reception during lunch, I said yes, because I wanted to. A small thing. But I noticed the feeling. Choice. It changed even generosity. Caleb found work in late August. Dad told me first. Forklift job. Good. 38 hours to start. Good. He found an apartment. I sat up. Where? Off Route 48, 2 bedrooms. I smiled before I could stop myself. Good. Dad hesitated. Your mother says it's too small. There she was. Does Caleb think it's too small? I don't think he knows yet. That made me laugh. 3 days later, Caleb texted for the first time since the meeting. Got keys. Underneath was a photograph of a beige apartment door. No ribbon, just a key in his palm. I stared at it, then typed, "Congratulations." The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, kids get their own room when they're here. I take the couch if needed. I read that twice. Not perfect, but movement. I replied, they'll remember that. He sent a thumbs up. That was all. In October, the peony I had transplanted began settling into the soil beside my porch. The leaves had browned, which made me worry I had killed it. I called Dad. Normal, he said immediately. They die back. You sound very confident for someone who spent 40 years growing tomatoes. Your grandmother taught me some things. I crouched beside the plant. Mom's mother? Yeah. Another piece of family history arriving late. She loved those flowers. I know. Dad was silent. Then he said, Linda asked about you yesterday. My hand stopped in the soil. What did she ask? Whether the new office was going well. What did you say? That it was. And? Nothing. I waited for the ache. It came, but smaller than before. Okay. Andrea. Yeah? She kept the education papers. I closed my eyes. How do you know? They're in the drawer by the rooster clock. That detail broke something open. Not enough for forgiveness, not enough for hope. Just enough to remind me that people can reject a truth publicly and still keep it privately. What does that mean? Dad sighed. I don't know. For once, I appreciated the answer. In our family, too much damage had been done by people pretending they knew what other people's choices meant, so we left it there. The second Saturday in October, a truck came up my gravel drive. Not a moving truck, Caleb's old pickup. Ellie and Sam spilled out first. Then Caleb stepped down holding something behind his back. He looked nervous. That was new. Hey. The kids ran toward the dock. Caleb stayed at the bottom of the porch steps. I brought these. He held out the brass keys from Maple Street. The same copies my mother had made. The red ribbon was faded now. I thought you left those at the house. Claire gave them to Dad. Dad gave them to me. He looked at the keys. They don't open anything. No. Kind of stupid carrying them around. Maybe. He extended his hand. Thought they should be yours. I took them. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I should have asked you. The sentence was quiet. No defense attached. No explanation. Just 4 words. I looked at him. Yes. He nodded. I really thought Mom had handled it. That's part of the problem. I know. Another surprise. He looked toward the lake. I've been thinking about that. Careful, it can become a habit. He almost smiled. Then his expression turned serious. I didn't ask for 60,000. I know, but I would have taken it. I know that too. He exhaled. That's worse somehow. No. I set the keys on the porch rail. Knowing it now is better than never noticing. He looked at me. Are we okay? The old Andrea would have said yes immediately. Would have wrapped the answer around him like a blanket. Instead, I told the truth. We're getting there. He nodded. Fair. We grilled burgers. Caleb burned the first batch because he was helping Sam untangle a fishing line. Nobody blamed me. Nobody asked me to fix the grill. Nobody announced where anyone would sleep. When the sun went down, Sam fell asleep on the couch with his cape over his face. Caleb picked him up. I showed him the spare room. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Fresh sheets. A small lamp. Ellie's backpack on the chair. Sam's stuffed dinosaur near the pillow. Quiet, Caleb said. Usually. He settled Sam onto the bed. Then he looked around. You didn't have to make space for them. The sentence mattered, because it contained the thing missing from every room my mother had assigned. Choice. I know. I smiled. That's why I wanted to. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. And in that small room, with nobody demanding anything from either of us, my brother finally seemed to understand what generosity looked like when it was not forced. Later, after Caleb drove home and the kids were asleep, I carried the brass keys to my desk. I considered throwing them away. Instead, I removed the red ribbon and placed it inside the back cover of my ledger. The keys went into the toolbox by the porch. Not because I expected to use them, because they reminded me that having a key does not make something yours. Permission matters, consent matters, asking matters. That lesson sounded obvious, but obvious things can take a lifetime to learn when your family teaches the opposite with a smile. Before bed, I checked my phone. There was one message from an unfamiliar number. I thought it might be spam. Then I recognized the wording. Your father says the peony survived. Mom. Nothing about the house. Nothing about Tuesday. No apology. No demand. Just a flower. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have answered immediately. The reflex wanted to reward any opening, however small. Instead, I set the phone down. Not forever. Just for tonight. A door could remain closed without being locked. And this time, if anyone wanted to enter my life, they would have to knock first. 3 days passed before I answered my mother. I kept rewriting the message because every version sounded like one of our old conversations. Too soft. Too careful. Too eager to make her comfortable. Finally I typed, the peony is doing well. I hope you are too. That was all. No apology I did not owe. No invitation she had not earned. No punishment either. She replied 6 hours later. Good. For my mother, one word could carry an entire weather system. I did not answer again. November came cold. The lake turned silver in the mornings, and my office entered year-end planning. Ellie started sending me photographs of horses she drew during math class. Sam discovered knock-knock jokes and treated them like a legal obligation. Caleb kept his apartment. More importantly, he kept his job. One Thursday Dad called and said, almost casually, your brother paid us back for the electric bill. I smiled. How much? $83. That's specific, he insisted. I understood why Dad sounded proud. $83 was not money, it was evidence. Consequences had not destroyed Caleb. They had introduced him to himself. Thanksgiving was harder. Tessa had the children until afternoon, and Caleb invited me to his apartment for dessert. I went. There were folding chairs because he owned only 4 real ones. The pie was store-bought. The coffee was terrible. It was one of the best holidays I had ever had. Nobody assigned me a task. Nobody asked what I had brought besides myself. At 7, Dad arrived alone. He carried a covered dish. Your mother made sweet potatoes, he said. The room went quiet. Caleb looked at me. I looked at Dad. Did she know you were bringing them? Yes, that mattered. I lifted the foil. Marshmallows browned exactly the way she knew I liked them. There was no note. No apology. No demand. I took one serving, not because everything was fixed, because boundaries are not walls around bitterness. They are doors with handles on both sides. Christmas came next. I did not go to my parents' house. That choice hurt. I want that recorded honestly. Healthy decisions can still ache. I woke Christmas morning at the cottage and cried while coffee brewed. Then tires crunched outside. Ellie and Sam burst through my front door carrying wrapping paper, followed by Caleb, Tessa, and Dad. Dad held an old wooden music box. Found this in the attic, he said. When I opened it, a tiny metal melody played. I recognized nothing. Dad did. Your mother used to practice this song. I looked at him. Why bring it here? She said you should have it. My chest tightened. Did she? He nodded. I turned the little key again. The melody was thin and imperfect. Still, it filled the room. Something about that nearly undid me. Not because it meant my mother had changed. People are not repaired by symbolism. But somewhere south of the lake, a woman who once lost a piano had chosen not to keep one more object simply because she could. That was not redemption. It was movement. And movement counts. In January, Mom called. The first real call. Andrea? Hi, Mom. A long pause. Then, your father says the children like the lake. They do. Another pause. I should not have copied your key. My hand tightened around the phone. She continued before I could answer. I should not have promised the house. Her voice shook. I still think family should help family. So do I. But you think I made help into something else? Yes. Silence. Then the hardest sentence she had ever given me. I think maybe I did. I sat down. Not victory, not satisfaction, grief, mostly. Because apologies arrive carrying the shape of everything that could have been different. I'm not ready for Sunday dinner, I said. I know, and nobody gets to use the kids to pressure me. I know, and if you need something from me, you ask. She was quiet. Then she said, all right, not warm, not perfect, but asked and answered. Months later, the peony bloomed. One enormous pink flower opened beside my porch. Ellie found it first and shouted for everyone to come outside. Caleb was grilling. Sam was chasing something imaginary. Dad sat on the steps. My mother was there too, her first visit. She had called beforehand. That detail meant more than the visit itself. She stood beside the flower for a long time. Your grandmother would have liked it here, she said. I think so. Then she looked at the cottage. Do you have enough room? The old question. But her tone was different. I smiled. For the people I invite, she nodded. And that was enough. That changed every relationship. Caleb began asking instead of assuming. Dad started speaking before silence became agreement. Mom learned that an invitation sounds different from an order. I learned something too. Saying no did not make me colder. It made every yes honest. The people who stayed were no longer there because I paid, fixed, yielded, or absorbed. They stayed because we chose one another freely. I still keep the useless Maple Street keys in my toolbox. The red ribbon remains inside my ledger. Not as trophies, as reminders. A key is not permission. A family announcement is not consent. Generosity without choice is not generosity. And a quiet person is not an empty room waiting for someone louder to decide what belongs inside. My mother once stood at dinner and gave my house away. I let them pack. I let them rent the truck. I let their copied keys meet a lock that no longer recognized them. But the real revenge was never the moving day humiliation. It was learning that I did not have to destroy my family to stop disappearing inside it. Sometimes the strongest revenge is simply this. You stop surrendering. You keep your own keys. And when someone finally knocks, you decide whether the door opens.